Europe's security dilemma is that 500 million people are depending on 360 million people for their defense, or something like that. Why is Europe depending on the United States for its defense? Well, we know the historical reasons, that it was the US who helped Europe to defeat the Nazi regime in World War II. And before that, the US helped the Brits defeat Germany in World War I. But if we take a little look back, this is completely unthinkable. It's a situation that just can't be. A people, a country that does not defend itself is not free and sovereign. So Europe has to step up and do something about this. Meanwhile, let's look at it from the US perspective. In World War I, the United States did not want to get involved. Eventually they had to, and as a benefit of doing that, they took over a big part of the British Empire, and the US became the global maritime empire after that. In World War II, this process accelerated. So now it's not hard to see, if you put yourself in Trump's head, an awful place to be for sure, and think like this: by withdrawing the support for Europe and basically telling Putin, you're welcome to attack, then he weakens Europe, he forces Europe to beg on the knees again for American help, and that gives him a good negotiating position, because that's the only thing Trump thinks about, negotiating position. So, if we don't want to give away even more of Europe's freedom and position in the world to the United States, we have to defend ourselves. And I think the European leaders are well aware of that and are stepping up to the plate with a military buildup that's perhaps not as strong as it could be, but still extremely strong compared to what it has been for 80 years. Now let's look at a couple of specific things, and this is for the Canadians now specifically, and also the other countries who have ordered F-35 fighter jets. Here in Sweden, we have been outside NATO, we have had our own method of building up defense. We've been non-aligned for about 200 years, and we've been in a Cold War with the Soviet Union, Russia, since World War II and even before. This Cold War never stopped. Fighter pilots were meeting fighter pilots over the Baltic Sea, and pilots died in the encounters even though no shots were fired. Swedish pilots always flew as if in war, which means flying very low, unlike the Americans. And that cost lives, because I have personal experience of that. I once drove at an area where fighter pilots were training in Sweden, and a jet plane came over my car at an altitude of about 10 feet. Luckily, I wasn't easily scared back then, so I didn't lose control of the car, but that's how low they flew. The trees were about 18 meters tall, and they were flying below that level. Because that's how the Swedish tactic is in war, fly low. And that is why the Swedish JAS 39 Gripen were able to defeat in exercise the F-35 by tactic. And because the F-35, even though it's supposedly stealth, it communicates. It's like a radio beacon. So in a war, which we've seen now in the Ukraine, the development goes extremely fast. In a war, the first thing that goes out the window, next after the truth, is your plans. And there's the biggest weakness with the F-35, that everything has to go to the US for approval, for implementation, even your plans. So effectively, if the US has to be the one who implements the attack, the plan for the attack, then they do have a kill switch. If you can't do anything in-house, you don't have control. And the other thing is with the update cycle. In the F-35, the update cycle takes about 2 years. But we know from the battle in Ukraine that you don't have 2 years. In the just Gripen, you go out and fly, you meet the enemy, and a large part of that encounter deals with radio communication, signals. And then all of that is recorded, and the plane can be updated to next day, basically. And whereas, let's say it takes 2 years with the F-35. Let's say it takes 2 days with the Gripen. But when you implement artificial intelligence, maybe it will take 2 seconds. And that, the speed with which you react to the enemy's reactions, that is what decides who will win the future war, which, by the way, is already here in Europe. So that's where we are at. And meanwhile, not this continuous Cold War that went on between Sweden and Russia, never stopped, also went on under the surface of the Baltic Sea with the submarines. The Russians were in our waters, and we were in their waters. There has been a continuous war under the surface, a Cold War, of infiltrating and placing out sensors. So I want you to keep one thing in mind in Canada. The Swedish companies that are selling you equipment are not going to tell publicly what they can do, because that is essential military safety, security, and classified. Don't ever expect to find out the true capabilities. But the capability that should matter most to you is the capability to react fast and change fast. That is what will determine the war. Sovereignty comes from having a sovereign power. And remember that the ultimate power sits in the sharp tip of the spear. Keep your sovereignty, Canada. Don't buy from a country on which you cannot depend and which does not give you absolute full control over your warfare capabilities. So, we in Europe, we have to stand up. I think the politicians realize it. Perhaps not all the people do yet. But I hope you do the right thing over there in Canada too. Over and out for today.